Welcome. I'm happy to be with you again. Some of you I do know from at the beginning of January or mid-January. I was with you in Germany, in Wernfels. So I saw some familiar faces already. Yes, and our just to give a little bit of background information for those who do not know me, I have, together with three other Adventist mothers, we have created a podcast in 2020 during the pandemic. We started a podcast. It's called In Bindung in German. But we have also started to translate our episodes into other languages. So far, we have episodes in English, French, Spanish, and Russian. And and our podcast has grown over the years. And right now in the German-speaking area, it's quite known among Christians, not only Adventists, but also other Christians of different denominations are listening to the podcast. This is our team. I'm on the right side, and the other three ladies are with me. We're doing it together. But when it comes to English presentations, that's my job. Since I'm originally an English and French teacher, and now this is what we're doing right now. We're three teachers and one social worker, and we have all left our jobs to work in our project because people are asking for it. The feedback has been overwhelming over the years, so we decided to do that. And our topic tonight will be, I hope that my voice is staying with me, because I was a little bit sick and my voice is still not quite okay, but I think we'll make it. The topic I chose is the defiant toddler and the rebellious teenager, dealing with counterwill. So counterwill is not an English word. It has been translated from a German term that has been made up by a German psychologist, Gegenwille, and then a Canadian developmental psychologist by the name of Gordon Neufeld. He made up the English term for it and called it counterwill. But we will, I think you will very easily grasp the concept, because it's the concept of counterwill. This is something that everybody knows. Everybody knows what counterwill is when I tell you an example of it. But before we start with that, I'd like to dive a little bit into the maybe let's call it the spiritual background of the whole thing. I think we all agree that God, when he created man in his own image. Let us create man. Let us create human beings in our image. And so it's essential also for our purpose this evening that God created us and gave us dignity. He gave dignity to the human being. He created us with a non-negotiable value. He wanted us, and he still wants us, to unfold our potential. He wants us to exercise, to experience self-efficacy, and dignity and autonomy in general are essential for us as human beings. God does not impose his opinion or his will upon us. You need to do, and if you don't, God is a gentleman. The Holy Spirit leads gently, not by force. He woos. He wants us to follow. He leads us into his love and tries to convince us like this. So, and God does this because he knows that if he does it otherwise, he will activate our counterwill. What we as parents often do. we often do not lead gently, but we hurt our children and hurt our children's hearts. And this often activates counterwill. So I'll give you some examples. Counterwill, you will know it in all stages, as children, teenagers, adults. There's counterwill, and you all experience counterwill on a daily basis. It has nothing to do with, well, if I'm a good Christian, I will not experience it. No, you all know it. And I'll give you an example for an adult at first. I remember one morning when the children were just gone to school and kindergarten, and I was just cleaning up the last bits, and then I was ready to really start my daily work, to go on my computer and start working on whatever I was doing at that time. And then the telephone rang, and I was like, okay. I picked it up, and immediately after the first seconds, I recognized that there was someone who wanted me to sell something. I don't even remember what the lady wanted to sell to me. It was some sort of magazine, or I don't remember. And I was, and the way she tried to sell me that, it was in a very aggressive way. She was like not giving me the chance to say anything. She was like introducing herself very quickly and then going on, blah, 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 blah. This is what I want you to sell, what I want you to give. And I was like instantly taken aback. I was annoyed and I was irritated because I felt like she was trying to force something onto me that I absolutely didn't want, and I was not in the mood, and I was just about to start my day and work and everything. And so what she did was not very helping to get me in the mood to buy her product, whatever it was. Another example for counterwill, I have a teenager story for you. I just imagine you're a teenager and your parents, and on Sunday afternoon, you don't have much plans up, but you're thinking about meeting your friends in the afternoon. And then your parents tell you, hey, we're going to visit old Aunt, whatever, Miranda. But you have other plans in mind and you don't want to go to old Aunt Miranda because it will be boring. Your parents will be talking to her and you will be sitting around not knowing what to do. So you feel an inner resistance to that plans of your parents. This is also has to do with counterwill. Last but not least, an example from a toddler. Maybe you still remember these situations. You have a toddler, let's say she's 3 or 4 years old, and you are in a hurry. You have an appointment, you have to go, you have to leave the house, and you tell your toddler, well, come on, go to the bathroom one more time, and then we need to go. And your toddler's crying, no, I don't want to go, and I don't want to go to the bathroom. And all in all the time, most of the time, the answer to everything is no. So also this example has to do with counterwill. In all 3 situations, we encounter counterwill, and you can put the definition to counterwill. It's an instinctive resistance to perceived or real coercion. So the coercion can be in place, it can be there, yes, but it's enough for the counterwill to be activated if the coercion is only perceived. So it's not really there, but the person feels like it is there. And actually, it's just normal physics. So when you apply pressure to anything, it causes counter pressure. And especially with little children, this counter pressure is not only always verbally expressed with loud no's, it can even be physically expressed by little children. I have two two studies for you, two experiments that were made with children. And one of them is called the forbidden toy test, and the other one is the magic marker test. Both of them prove counterwill and show how it works. And these are very nice examples where you can see counterwill working in toddlers. So I'll just explain these to you. First of all, the forbidden toy test. They put children, only one children at a time, into a room, and they are presented with a particularly interesting toy and the room is stimulus free with few toys. So not a very interesting room, not a lot of no other toys, or just a few. And the most interesting toy was placed before them. And the different groups of children were given different orders, and these orders were varying in intensity. So in the group with the weakest intensity, there was like a mild threat given. Not a threat, like an order or a command, or even only they asked them, please do not play with this toy. And in the group with like the highest intensity, they really give a harsh threat, like, if you dare to play with this toy, then a harsh consequence follows. The children in the control group were shown the toy without further comment. And then the children were left alone for a few minutes. Perhaps you can already guess the result. The children of the group who had been threatened the worst, exactly these children played with the toy most often and for the longest time. Sorry. So, and the equivalent to this test is the magic marker test. The children were again divided into groups and presented with magic pens. In general, children love colorful pens, things that sparkle. And again, the children were given different levels of incentives to play with the pens. And these incentives ranged from, it would be really good if you play with these pens, to, if you play with these pens, you'll get a big ice cream afterwards. So everything from like a mild encouragement to a reward or even bribery. The control group, again, was just given the pens without any further comment. In the weeks that followed, the children were given the magic pens again and again, and the result was clear. The more the children had been pushed to use the pens in the beginning, the less interest they showed in the pens in the weeks that followed. And both tests are classic examples for counterwill. The greater, we had it here, the greater the perceived coercion the children felt, the less willing they were to be obedient and show the desired behavior. Now, we all are attachment beings. God created us as attachment beings. And if the attachment is strong enough to another human being, then we have an inner urge to follow the person we are attached to. And by following them, we get the chance to establish closeness and thus more attachment. So this is a positive cycle. And if we are attached, if we follow the person we are attached to, this automatically deactivates or lessens counterwill. At the same time, the heart of the child is soft and empathic. The child rests in the love for their attachment figure, which again liberates energy to learn new things. When the child is resting in the bond, in the attachment with their attachment figure, they can start to explore new things, to learn new things. And this is how they mature, how the maturation process is going on, and they are learning new things, they are, new abilities and so on. So this is the positive, a healthy attachment cycle that helps for children to mature. And the children in these two studies with the forbidden toys and the magic pens, they were not attached to the researchers who did these experiments with them. These were complete strangers for the children. And so any attachment that could have made them exhibit the desired behavior did not exist, therefore. So studies also show that a child who does not follow a strange adult just like that, that's a normal and healthy child. And God also never intended us or intended for children to be bossed around, but only to be dealt with within an attachment setting, an attachment relationship. So it is perfectly normal for a child to refuse to take orders or kisses from adults that he or she hardly knows. So, for example, I think if we look into some churches where it is expected that little children give hugs or kisses to elder sisters or whatever, often for us as parents, it's embarrassing if our children refuse to do this, but this behavior actually is healthy and good, and one should be more concerned about a child who is obediently being ordered around by everyone, taking orders by everyone, because for this child maybe already has given up on him or herself, or their will has been broken. It is healthy again for a child to take orders only from those that he or she is attached to. And these can be the parents, these can be the grandparents, and these can, of course, also be certain people in church that they have regular contact with. For example, the sister that is doing the Sabbath school lessons for the children, or the brother. I'll give you another example, because these have been, again, these two studies for dealing with toddlers. But counterwill is also present. They did a study with teenagers, and it was about how anti-drug and safer sex campaigns among teens in New York City, how they work, or they wanted to see how the targeted youth, how they reacted to the campaigns. And what they found out was very surprising. The teens who were the targets of these campaigns, they were more likely to use drugs and have unprotected sex than teens who did not notice the campaign at all. The more we are aware of our counterparts' agenda, the less willing we are to follow it or them. The only exception here is if our desire is as great or the same as our counterpart's desire, or if we are attached to them. And earlier we said that counterwill can be eliminated through attachment. When we love someone, we are more likely to comply with their demands, even if we don't actually feel like it at the moment. And maybe now you're worried because you think, wow, but my toddler or my teenager or my 8-year-old or whatever is showing counterwill. So are they not attached to me? Do they not love me? Do we not have a good attachment? But here's the thing, counterwill during some phases of our lives is quite normal, and will be present in a higher form during these years of phases. So it's part of the natural developmental process. And the first time we see this is in toddlers when they reach the age of around 2. I know that in English we have the term the terrible twos. Actually, what happens during the terrible twos, that's the first autonomy process. The toddler discovers self-efficacy. By what I do or say, I can influence my environment. I can influence things, I can influence people, and so on. And parallel to this, they are striving for more autonomy. And this is important for the development of their own personality. There is the first beginning detachment from their parents. They see that they can act on their own, can do things on their own. So this, when we see this counterwill in toddlers, that's actually normal and even healthy. Counterwill in toddlers at that age normally arises when they are resting in a secure attachment to their parents. So they are securely attached, and this is when they have like the freedom to explore their own will. You can also call counterwill the immune system of our personality, because it helps to fight off unwanted orders or things that come upon us from outside. So outer stimuli are repelled by counterwill, and it helps to grow the inner will and also autonomy. And what counterwill does in this case is it follows the so-called orthogenetic principle. This was developed by a psychologist from the 20th century called Heinz Werner. He was Austrian, I think. And what he says in general, the orthogenetic principle says that you go from a state of globality where there is no differentiation, everything is the same, it's like one big thing. You go to a state of increasing differentiation and putting things in hierarchies, and then integrate again at these newfound things that you have differentiated. So what this means for the toddler is that in the beginning, they are totally dependent upon us as parents. They are attached. They need attachment to be close to us to survive. And then when they turn 1.5, 2 years, they, as I said, find the first things or see the first things that are different. Their own will, they see that they have self-efficacy and all these things, and they see their own boundaries, see boundaries of others, and all of these things. So now they somehow detach a bit from their parents, and they start to, as we've seen here, to differentiate a bit. And this causes, of course, separation from the parents. So what they need to do, again, because they want to be attached, it's a high goal for them, they need to go back from separation into integration. These newfound hierarchies, these newfound bits and pieces, they've pulled apart, they can now bring back together, or this is their aim, to bring them back together and integrate them within them. And these, the two most prominent phases where this happens is around 2 to 5, and then puberty again. I'll try to explain it by giving you another example. When my daughter was 3 years old, she wanted to light the fireplace with me. So everything was wonderful. We were practicing this bonding task together, and we go to the fireplace together. And at some point during the procedure, it happened that I said something like, "Now, can you please give me one of those wood chunks over there, chunks of wood back there?" And she, however, was already on her way to get one of the wood chunks, which I didn't notice. So she stopped abruptly in her run, let herself fall on the ground, and then she howled, "You shouldn't tell me that. I can't do it now anymore." Boo. And was crying and was really throwing a tantrum. But what she was saying actually here was, "Mom, I already know this. I've done this with you before, and you don't have to tell me what to do every time. I'm growing. I need more autonomy or more responsibility given to me, and I can do this myself. I'm not so little anymore, and stop treating me like a baby. And I want to be allowed to do things myself on my own accord, and not because you're telling me. So please don't tell me, because I want to make my own decision. And now you've again taken this decision making from me in this case." And we see in this example again the resistance she had to this coercion she felt now that I've told her to get the wood chunk. So this is counterwill par excellence again. And this is exactly why this autonomy phase with toddler is so stressful. The children want more autonomy, more independence, more of their own will. And it so often collides with the will, or simply in this case, my automatism, or the parents' automatisms. I just said that without thinking any further. If you know about the benefit of counterwill in the autonomy phase, as I told you before, that it's healthy and normal, it can help you not to get angry about it, because counterwill promotes the growth of the inner will and autonomy. And as I said before, in the beginning, as an infant, the child is completely dependent on us, and therefore, in order to become a self-motivated and independent person with a real will of their own, in the process of maturation, the terrible twos in this phase, it's indispensable. It's there. And the child can only mature by also beginning to detach themselves somewhat from us in order to become an independent person. And as we know, they can mature only if they are resting safely in our attachment. I've told you before. And when counterwill shows as a result, this looks like contradictory in the first moment, but it's logical. When they're resting in our attachment, they have the freedom to explore themselves, to mature, to grow. And the way how they do this is by showing counterwill in these phases. So the detachment phase inevitably means going into confrontation with the parents to find out, what is my will? Do I want what my parents are currently asking of me? And if I'm unsure and have to learn all this first, then in most cases, the psychologically healthy toddler will say no. And this is exhausting, yes. Stressful, yes, but it's normal. And developmental psychologist Gordon Neufeld said that counterwill is a normal human dynamic that all children have, even when the attachment to their parents is good. This is what I said. When it's good, then they will show counterwill. For most of them, that means for the children, Counterwill will remain a recurrent but fleeting experience. So it comes, but it also goes. And it will be limited to situations in which the adult uses more pressure to make the child conform to his expectations than the attachment gives them power in the concrete situation. Such moments cannot always be avoided for parents, but wise parents will intuitively seek to limit them and to assert their will openly only in those situations in which circumstances or the child's welfare require it. So I'll read again this passage that I have underlined. Counterwill will be limited to situations in which the adult uses more pressure to make the child conform to his expectations than the attachment gives them power in the concrete situation. And as we have seen, sometimes this pressure may not really be felt by us as parents as pressure, but may very well be felt like that by the child. I think that this quote really takes away the pressure from us as parents or also as leaders in the church. I do not always have to impose my will at all costs so that the child learns that it doesn't work that way and so on, that it has to follow. We may think that we are showing weakness by not engaging in the power struggle with children, but the opposite is true. We are acting wisely, we are not damaging the attachment, and we are not activating counterwill even more by going into the power struggle. So power struggles is one of the risks of counterwill, because how do power struggles happen? The child reacts to our will or to the pressure that we apply with counterwill. And then we take this reaction of the child as a declaration of war. And now I have to show who's the master in the house and so on. And this is where the power struggle starts. But in reality, it's not a struggle between the will of the child and the will of the adult. It's a struggle of the counterwills of both. We activate the child's counterwill, the child reacts. We don't want to be bullied around by our own child. We answer with a stronger counter reaction, which drives the child more into counterwill and so on. Until at one point in the end, the pressure for the child becomes so great that they usually, out of fear for the attachment that they might lose, they give in, they give up, they suppress their being for us. And then when they do it, when they give up, when we have won, as the parents, they often do it with great anger and confusion in their heart. So and the problem is the older we get, when we have teenagers later, this balance of power, it balances out. And we no longer, as parents, have the power over them as we had when they were younger. And then they will maybe no longer give in to us. We will lose more and more power. And if the power is lost and we have not a stable relationship built with them over the years, if there's no more attachment, then in the end, we are left with nothing to guide them, to direct them. So one very important thing, do not take counterwill personally and so resist the power struggle. And at this point, it's very important for me that you do not misunderstand me. I do not want to say by this that you should let your child do whatever his brain focuses on, be it eating chocolate until they get sick or riding a bicycle in the middle of the street. I just wanted to show you here that these destructive dynamics of counterwill, because as I said, the older the child, the less they will give in. So act wisely and try to lead through attachment and not by exercising your power. Why do we take counterwill personally and think, oh, I cannot let them walk all over me and myself and so on? This often triggers our own childhood, this behavior by our children, because very frequently thoughts pop up in our head like, wow, I would have never acted like that, and so on. And all of this leads us to engage in these power struggles and not to see the child for what it really tries to achieve in that in this moment, and why it reacts like this. And another risk of counterwill is, of course, to get stuck in counterwill. So there are adults who are still very often stuck in counterwill. As I said in the beginning, we all experience situations of counterwill on a daily basis, and our counterwill is activated on a daily basis. But normally, as healthy adults, we can snap out of that. We can just by rational reasoning say, okay, I'll handle it like this or that. But especially if you were never allowed to show counterwill during your toddler or teenage years, you might turn into an adult that is constantly in his adult life or her adult life stuck in counterwill. In certain situations or in general. I'll give you an example for that. I have a friend, and she in her childhood was very strongly drilled in how a good Christian should behave. For example, she was always urged to take care of children, of visitors who came to her church. So either when there were day guests or new guests to the church, her parents asked her to go and play and talk to the children that came with their parents, with their guests, the new guests. Because as a good Christian, you take care of others. And in doing so, you're going to make Jesus happy. And you do want to please Jesus, don't you? But the problem was that approaching strangers did not correspond to her rather shy nature at that time. And as a result, now that she is a grown woman, having her own children and everything, she still bristles when she sees a guest enter the door of her church. So even though no one asks her to take care of the newcomer anymore, but the coercion that caused the reluctance back then is not even there anymore, but she still feels it. She herself thinks that it's a total pity, because she would like to approach others in a happy manner, or welcoming them. And in the meantime, she succeeds oftentimes in doing so because she knows about counterwill, and she has reflected upon that in her story. And so she can find her way into doing it voluntarily. But I find this story very sad, because it shows that my friend here was not only in counterwill toward her parents, but also in counterwill toward God, because she was given a false image of what God is like through the influence of others, in this case, through her parents. And even if she now knows intellectually, like cognitively, that Jesus does not force anyone to do things that they do not want, it is still often emotionally not possible for her to separate herself from this view. So I think this shows how important it is to deal wisely with counterwill. And I'd like to give you some general tips in case of counterwill. It is important to always activate the attachment before you are approaching your child with a request. We follow more willingly when we are attached. And it is important to always get back into the attachment first. Sometimes this is more difficult with teenagers, because they tend to be oftentimes more attached to their peers, their peer group, than to us. And this is why it's so important that we are always working on our attachment with our children, no matter their age, so that we still have this bond, this attachment when they are entering teenage age. Whether as a parent or youth group leader or whatever, strengthening attachment always means gaining influence over the child. It's also important to show empathy, to show the child that I understand you, I can feel what you're feeling, I know this feeling too, and I see whatever that you're in a situation that you are, that I see you there. And I said this before, do not take it personally. Counterwill has to do with the development of their personality. And also what helps with counterwill is to enable self-determination. So let them do things on their own, give them responsibility whenever possible, wherever possible. Adaptation process, I'm sorry, we do not have the time, so I could go more into this. But it just in general means that we help younger children, toddlers, to find their tears about things they cannot change. So I said, no, I know this is hard for you now. I'm not being angry at you, but my no stance, it's a firm no. But I will help you through the feelings you go through with this no now. But I will be there for you, I will help you, but the no is still there. And so not separating us from them when we are setting a boundary, but still keeping the attachment to them. The bond is still there, even though I have to give you a boundary here and to say, stop, this is where it ends. Okay. And I'd like to say some, before we go to the teenager cases, once again, what also helps, just like some practical tools, is what always helps to deactivate counterwill in toddlers especially is play. Play is such a wonderful instrument to get children what we want them to do. For example, brushing their teeth. This is a topic that comes up again and again in our work that we experience. Parents always have an issue with that. So brushing the teeth is necessary. We cannot say, okay, don't brush your teeth. It is, you have to do this. So we think we need to force our children to do this. This like automatically activates counterwill. So what do? We make a game out of it, play. So for example, we think of a story like the toothbrush, it eliminates I don't know, some enemies out of your mouth, and it will fight them or whatever, something that your child likes. Or you can be creative and come up with anything. Or yeah, and so make like a joyful game out of it that people like to engage in. Or when oftentimes people have problems with parents with their toddlers not wanting to get dressed in the morning. So you can just, lay out their clothes like one by one and do something like a street where they have to, like a parkour, where they have to first put on your underwear and the next one. And so make a game out of it. Or if your child has problems going to bed in the evening, sleep is always a time where they are separated from their parents. So this always can be hard for them to go to bed in the evening. So make a game out of it. For example, a friend of mine always plays that they are little animals. One evening they are cats, the other evening they are dogs, and then they are little animals, cats or dogs, who are going to bed. So a game is always a good way to help get out of counterwill with younger children. So the case with teenagers is a bit different, because if counterwill in the toddler phase was very much oppressed by very strict parents, it can be that their adolescence may be harder. Because if you couldn't find your own self, or part of your own self, part of your own personality during your toddler years, couldn't detach enough or whatever, you couldn't explore enough, then it might be in some cases that adolescence, puberty is harder on the parents and the adolescent than it would have been if they had more of the chance to explore themselves, their own will and so on during the toddler years. And also, if you cannot find yourself or what you want, what's your will, what's your purpose in life, whatever, during the teenage years, this just gets postponed to later in life, when the have-tos in later life are getting greater, becoming greater than the want-tos. Then we experience counterwill as adults. And if we don't rediscover our want-tos that normally happens around midlife, if we feel crushed by obligations and expectations around us, then if we didn't get through it in adolescence, there will be a big crisis in our midlife, the so-called midlife crisis. So to go through these phases during our toddler years and adolescence is necessary in order not to be just postponed from youth to adulthood to later life. And the other question, or what is special with the teenagers, I already said it a little bit. The question is still, is it a healthy counterwill that my teen shows, or is it the counterwill that he or she shows because of peer orientation? So is he or she more attached to his or her peers than to us as parents? Then this is a special case of counterwill, and then it's harder to act on this. So coercion, when coercion is greater than the attachment and the emergence, and emergence means by emergence is meant the way of becoming your own self, then this is a problem in teenage years. So your goal also in teenage years, and it's similar to the toddler years, is you want to enhance attachment, and you want to reduce coercion and also enhance emergence. Just some quick thoughts on that. How do you enhance attachment? You strengthen the relationship, you deepen the attachment, you spend time with each other, you talk to each other. If there's no attachment, you cannot direct your teen. How do you reduce coercion? You refrain from using a prescriptive or commanding manner. You make agendas and expectations less explicit. You refrain from focusing on the shoulds and musts and have-tos, and you use as little force and leverage as possible. You back off until you get a better attachment hold. You use structures and routines to orchestrate behavior. You draw attention away from the coercive elements of the situation. And how do you enhance emergence? You consult your teen regarding their ideas and opinions. You put the focus on the teen's will. So what are their intentions, preferences, wants, and so on. You make room for the adolescents' initiatives and their involvement. You solicit good intentions instead of imposing consequences. You place them in charge where it is appropriate and possible. And you gradually retire more and more to a consulting role as a parent. And now for the last minutes, I'd like to make swing a little bit to the Bible. I have two quotes here for you. One is from our podcast. Jesus knew that as soon as a person feels coercion, he can achieve fake submission at best. So Jesus was master in not activating counterwill and deactivating it. He didn't always succeed. We will have a look at this in our little groups. But and the second quote is by theologian Ty Gibson. I'm sure a lot of you will know him. He says that love and coercion can never enter a room together. So what I would like you to reflect on is on some Bible verses in the Bible. I have thought we'd split up into 4 groups, and each group, I'll quickly go through this with you. Group 1 will read John 4, 1 to 29, and we'll talk about how did Jesus deactivate the woman's counterwill, and how did he make sure that counterwill does not arise in that case. If you still have the time, I'll give you 10 minutes each group. You can also talk about the second question. Jesus did not succeed in deactivating counterwill in every person. For example, the Pharisees. Why do you think is that? So you can think about this question. Group 2, you all have the same second question, if only the first question varies. Group 2 will read John 1, verses 43 to 51. How did Jesus and also Philip deactivate Nathanael's counterwill? Group 3 will read about how Paul was behaving when he came to Athens. How did he deactivate the counterwill of the Athenians? And group 4 will browse through Exodus 3 and 4. How did God deactivate Moses' counterwill? And we will take 8 to 10 minutes for this, and we will split up in 4 groups. I will put the questions again for all the 4 groups in the box, in the chat box. And